Welcome back to This is Thailand. Tonight's story is a strange one, and I want to be upfront about that before we start. Most of the stories we tell on this channel are about men who were lied to, men who didn't speak the language, didn't know the rules, didn't understand what was happening around them until it was far too late. That's the usual shape of it. This one isn't that. His name is Björn Halvorsen. He's 63 years old from Drammen, just outside Oslo, and he spent 41 years of his life pouring concrete and setting formwork on housing blocks in Norway. Big man, slow talker, the kind of man who tests a chair before he sits in it. He came to Thailand in the spring of 2023 with his mother's inheritance in the bank and a phone that had stopped ringing. And he came with something else too, something he'd never told anybody, not his family, not his friends, not the woman he would end up building a house for. There's an image from this story that I haven't been able to shake since he told it to me. A 63-year-old Norwegian sitting on a plastic stool in a dirt yard in Royet province, 400 kilometers from Bangkok, holding a glass of warm Leo, saying absolutely nothing. And around him, a family talking, comfortably, freely, about him, about what he had left. Nobody in that yard knew he could understand every single word. I'll say this much and then I'll get out of the way. Björn was not scammed. There's no villain in this one, no fake sick buffalo, no secret Thai husband, no bar girl with a boyfriend back in the village. And by the end of this, I think you'll understand why that made it worse, not better. Here's his story, in his own words. My name is Björn. I am 63 years old, and until 3 years ago, I had never lived anywhere, except Drammen, which is about 40 minutes from Oslo if the traffic is being reasonable, which it usually is not. I was a construction worker. 41 years. Mostly concrete and formwork. The last 10 years or so on the big housing blocks going up out past the ring road. I was not a foreman. I was never a foreman. I was offered it twice and said no both times because a foreman spends his day arguing with people, and I did not want to spend my day arguing with people. That is worth remembering, I think, when I tell you the rest of this. My hands do not close all the way anymore. I want to describe this properly because people say bad hands and they think it means arthritis, aching, an old man complaining. It is not that. It is that if I drop a coin on the floor, I have to think about the best method for picking it up. 41 years of cold steel and vibration and grip. That is the invoice. I paid it and I would pay it again, honestly, because I like the work. I want to say that clearly before I say anything else, because most of this story is me being a fool, and I do not want you to think I was a fool for 41 years too. Concrete is honest. That is the thing about it. A pour tells you the truth. If the mix is wrong, you see it. If the formwork is going to blow out, it groans first, it sweats at the joints. It gives you a warning if you know how to look. Steel gives warning. Timber gives warning. In 4 decades, I never once saw a structure fail without telling somebody first that it was going to. I carried that into the rest of my life. I thought that was how everything worked. That things fail slowly and visibly, and you can see it coming. Now, my mother. She began to go in the autumn of 2021. Not dramatically, small things. She put the kettle in the fridge, and we all laughed about it. And then 8 months later, she was frightened of the hallway in her own house. There are 4 of us. 2 brothers, 1 sister, and me. And I was the one who lived 11 minutes away. So I was the one who went round. The argument was about the care home. My sister wanted her at home with a rota, and I said the rota would be me, because it had been me for a year already, and I said it in a way that I should not have said it. My brother Ova said something about how I had never had anything else to do anyway. Which was true. That was the problem with it. It was true. Then Mama died in the February, and there was a second argument about the house, and this one was worse because the first one had already happened. You know how that is. The second argument is never about the second thing. It is about the first thing. Wearing different clothes. I will not tell you exactly what was said at that kitchen table, partly because it is not interesting to anybody except us, and partly because I said a good deal of it, and I am not going to sit here and perform being the reasonable one. I was not blameless. I have thought about this for 3 years now, and every time I arrive at the same place, which is that I was maybe 40% wrong, and everybody else divided the other 60%, and 40% is far too much to be wrong when it costs you a family. And then the phone just stopped. That is the part one cannot properly explain to people. There was no announcement. Nobody said, "We are finished with you." My brother stopped calling. My sister stopped calling. My niece Ingrid, who I taught to ride a bicycle, stopped calling. And there is no exact day when it happened. It is like a slow leak in a roof. You do not notice the water. You notice the stain months later, and by then the beam underneath has already gone soft. The estate settled in the summer. Just under 1.2 million kroner after everything, which is around $115,000, or 4.5 million baht. Though I did not think in baht yet, it went into an account. And here is a stupid thing about me. My whole life I have known exactly what I have. To the 100 krone note, I could have told you at any moment on any day for 40 years. It is not that I am careful with money exactly. It is that knowing the number was how I knew I was all right. And suddenly there was this figure sitting there that I had not earned, that had come out of a woman I had argued about, and I did not know what it was for. It felt like standing on scaffolding that has not been tied off. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is moving. But your body knows. That winter was very bad. In Drammen, in February, the dark comes at 3 in the afternoon and does not leave. I would go to the Rema 1000 and buy food for one, and come home and eat it standing at the counter, and there was nobody anywhere who would notice if I did not. And in the January, this is the part one have never told anyone, and I am telling it to a camera, which tells you something about my life. I downloaded an application on my telephone for learning Thai. Not because of a woman, I want that understood. There was no woman. I had not even booked a flight. I did it in the evening, with the curtains shut, and I did not tell one single person because I was 63 years old and I was embarrassed to be seen learning something. I need to explain about Sverre first, because otherwise the whole thing sounds more romantic than it was. Sverre Bakken. I worked with him on scaffolding in the 90s, at Lørenskog, and he was not a friend exactly. He was a man I stood next to for 2 years. That is different, but it is also not nothing. We had each other on Facebook the way everybody has everybody on Facebook, which is to say I had not spoken to him since maybe 2004. And in the winter, he started posting photographs. Not showing off, that is what got me. If he had been posing with young women in a bar, I would have scrolled past and thought less of him. Instead, it was a photograph of a plate of food, a photograph of rain on a road, a photograph of him in a plastic chair with his ankles crossed, 71 years old, looking like a man who had nothing at all to do and did not mind. That is what I wanted, not Thailand. I want to be honest about that. I wanted the ankles crossed. He was in Hua Hin. I did not know where that was. I looked it up, which turned into 3 weeks of looking things up, because that is what a man like me does instead of feeling something. Here is what I decided. I decided I would not go to Pattaya. I read about Pattaya for about 4 evenings, and I read the forms, and I read the stories from men my age who had gone there with a pension and left with nothing. And I thought, well, I am not that. I am a careful man. You hear that? Listen to it. That is a 63-year-old man building himself a very clever little fence and then standing inside it feeling safe. So it was Hua Hin. Quiet, they said. Old town, the royal palace, lots of married couples, Germans and Scandinavians, and English who had been coming for 20 years. A night market that closes at a reasonable hour. Nobody has ever lost their inheritance in Hua Hin, I thought, which as far as I can tell was the only genuinely stupid idea I had that entire winter. I flew in March, Oslo to Doha, Doha to Bangkok, then the van down from Suvarnabhumi, 3 hours, 350 baht. The heat. I have to say something about the heat because I have never had a thing happen to my body like that. You come out of the terminal in the evening and it is not weather, it is a substance. It is like walking into a room where somebody has left a very large machine running. I stood there with my bag and I felt my shirt change texture. A Norwegian is not built for this. We are built for exactly one thing, which is complaining about the cold, and I lost that immediately. I found a place off Soy 94 behind Pechkasem Road, a small studio in a low block with tiles and a fridge that hummed and an air conditioner from probably 1998. 12,000 baht a month, which is about 3,600 kroner, about $340. In Drammen, that gets you a storage unit and a bus pass. The first 3 weeks were very good, and I do not want to skip over that because people telling these stories always rush to the bad part, and then you never understand why they stayed. I would wake at 6 because of the roosters, which are everywhere, including in a town with a Hilton in it. I would walk down to the fishing pier while it was still cool. There were monks out, orange, walking barefoot on that filthy road with their bowls, and old women crouched by the roadside waiting for them with rice, and I did not understand any of it, and I liked that I did not. I ate cow tom in a shop house where the woman charged me 40 baht and looked at me like I was slightly damaged. Motorbikes going past with entire families on them. Power lines like somebody had knitted them. And every building, every single one, even the 7-Eleven, has a little spirit house outside it with a strawberry Fanta in front of it. I asked Sver about the Fanta once. He said he'd been there 11 years and had a theory but not an answer. Sverre? Yes? He was good to me, actually. He took me to a bar in Soy Bintabat one night with 4 or 5 other men, Danes and 1 Yorkshireman. And it was fine, and I did not go back. Because here is the thing about a group of old European men in a bar in Thailand. Within about 90 minutes, somebody starts telling you about his ex-wife's lawyer. They are all very warm, and they are all very lonely, and they have organized the loneliness into opinions. I did not want to become that. I was afraid of becoming that. And being afraid of one thing is an excellent way to walk straight into a different thing without looking. By the 5th or 6th week, the good part wore off. One want to describe this properly because it surprised me. In Drammen, the loneliness made sense. Dark at 3 in the afternoon, nobody calls. Of course you feel like that. Fine. It matched. In Hua Hin, it did not match. That is what makes it worse. You are sitting outside at 8 in the evening with a plate of pad krapao and a cold Leo. The air smells of charcoal and grilled pork from the Mu Ping cart and that sharp thing from the Som Tam mortar. Everybody around you is talking and laughing, and the woman at the next table is feeding her grandson, and it is beautiful. And you cannot get in. You are behind glass. Warmth on all sides and not one word of it aimed at you. I ate alone every night for 2 months. I walked. God, I walked. I would do 8-9 kilometers a day just so the day would have a shape to it. And at night in the studio with the air conditioner going, I did the app. 15 minutes, then 30, then longer. I had been at it 13 months by then. Nobody knew. Sver did not know. I would sit there mouthing tones at a phone like an idiot, an old man with bad hands trying to get his mouth around kahao and ka'ao, which are 2 different words, and if you get them wrong, you have said something about a mountain when you meant rice. And one evening I was walking on Fetkasim and I read a shop sign, just read it. Slowly like a child, letter by letter, but I read it. It said something about photocopying. Nothing. It meant nothing. I stood on that pavement for a good while. The shirt was how it started. A blue shirt with a torn pocket, and there was a laundry and tailoring place on Soy 88, one of those narrow shop houses with a roller door and a fan clamped to a pipe and a stack of plastic-wrapped bundles behind the counter. Aunt's business. Machines going in the back. There was a woman at the counter, and she was maybe 40, and she did not look up straight away, which I remember because everybody in a tourist town looks up straight away. I tried it in Thai, the whole sentence, 13 months, and I had never once used it on a person. She let me finish. Then she laughed. Not cruel, just a genuine laugh, 1 syllable. And she said the word back to me the correct way and made me say it again. Nobody had corrected me about anything in about 4 years. Her name was Nok. And I did not tell her, then or for a long time after, how much of what people said around me I could actually follow. I told myself that was modesty. I went back for the shirt 3 days later, and it was ready, and I paid and I left. That was the whole thing. I want to be clear about the pace of this, because when people hear Thai girlfriend, they picture something that happens in a week. It did not happen in a week. It took 4 months before I would have called it anything at all. I went back to that shop because it was the only place in Hua Hin where somebody spoke to me like a person and not like a transaction. That is the honest reason. I would take in a shirt that did not need washing. I did that at least twice. A grown man of 63, carrying clean laundry down Soy 88 in the heat so a woman would correct his tones for 4 minutes. No. 39. From Roy Et, which I had to look up, and which is out in Isan, the northeast, about 600 kilometers from where we were standing. She was working the counter for her aunt, and the aunt was in the back with 2 machines going and a fan pointed at her face. And there was always that smell. Hot cotton and cheap detergent, and underneath, the drain. She was not what you would call beautiful. I have said that to people, and they think I am being unkind. I am not. She had a square sort of face and a gap in her teeth, and she was strong through the shoulders in the way that people are when they have carried things their whole life. When she laughed, she covered her mouth. She had a laugh like something escaping. 4 months. Let me tell you what 4 months of nothing looks like, because this is the part one have used to defend myself, in my own head, roughly 1,000 times. She never asked me for money, not once. Not for a drink, not for a taxi, not for her telephone bill. We ate at a place near the Chachai market where the whole menu was on a board, and none of it was in English, and she ordered for us both, and the first several times she paid. 80 baht, 90 baht. Nothing. But she paid, and when I reached for it, she put her hand flat on the table, and that was the end of the discussion. I remember she ordered me some tam once at a heat level that I can only describe as an industrial accident, and watched me eat it, and did not warn me, and laughed into her hand for about a minute and a half. In September, she took me on her motorbike up to a temple on the hill. Wat Khao Takiab, the one with the monkeys, and if anybody tells you the monkeys are charming, the monkeys are not charming. One of them took a bag of prawn crackers directly out of my hand like a customs officer. She paid the entrance. She did the merit-making thing, the little gold leaf, and she showed me how, and she did not laugh when I got it wrong, which I noticed. I sat on the wall up there, looking down at the bay, at the fishing boats and the long line of the beach going north, with my shirt stuck to my back, and I thought, I am having a good day. I have not had a good day since 2021. That is a dangerous thought for a man to have. It is dangerous because it makes you protective of the thing that caused it. Sver and the others were a problem around this time. I saw them maybe once a month in a bar near the Blueport, the mall on the highway, and they had opinions about everything. And eventually they had opinions about her. One of the Danes asked me where she worked. I told him, and he nodded and said, "Oh, that shop, yes, that's the good kind." I took it as reassurance. I did. At the time, I sat there and felt something loosen in my chest, because a man with 11 years in the country had just told me I had chosen correctly. It took me nearly 2 years to work out what was actually wrong with that sentence. He was not saying anything about Nok. He had never met Nok. He was telling me that he had a system for sorting Thai women into 2 bins, and that mine had landed in the better bin, and I had said thank you. Thank you for that. I am not proud of it. She told me about Fawn in October, her daughter, 11 years old, living with the grandparents up in Roy Et, in a house Nok had not lived in for 6 years because there is no work there. None. And so she was down here doing her aunt's counter and sending money north every month like about 2 million other women in this country. She told me about the father too, a Thai man from Kon Kaen, gone since the girl was 4. She did not cry about it. She did not perform any of it. She told me the way you would tell somebody about a job you used to have. That was the thing that got me more than anything. There was no version of the story where she was a victim. She had a bad thing happen and she went to work. I have thought about whether I was being managed, whether that flatness was itself a technique, and I do not think so. I have turned it over for years and I still do not think so. But I will say this. I wanted so badly for someone in the world to be plain with me, after Drammen, after all that shouting, that a plain woman could have sold me anything. The first ask did not come from her. I want that in the record. It came in December, from the aunt, and it did not come to me. That is the important part. The aunt was talking to Nok in the back of the shop, over the machines, and I was at the counter, and they were speaking Thai at normal speed and normal volume, which is to say at the speed and volume you use in front of a piece of furniture. And I understood it, not every word, maybe 70%. But I got the shape, the mother's sugar, the medicine, the price at the pharmacy in Cellopham, and the aunt saying something about how the farang could help, and Knock answering sharply, "No." I heard her say no, in Thai, when she did not know I was listening. Later that evening at the food stalls, I brought it up myself, and I asked, and she was embarrassed, and she waved it away and changed the subject. I asked again the next week. She refused a second time. Actually refused, actually annoyed with me, that little muscle going in her jaw. The third time I did not ask, I just did it. 8,000 baht a month, about 5,000 kroner, about $225, standing order to her account for her mother's insulin and the strips and whatever else. Against 1.2 million kroner sitting in Norway doing nothing, it was not money. It was a rounding error. It was less than I used to spend on diesel. And here's the thing I did with that overheard conversation, and I want you to watch me do it because this is the whole trick of the next 2 years in one movement. I checked her translation against what I had heard, and it matched. She had not exaggerated the amount. She had not invented a second illness. Everything she eventually told me about her mother was exactly what she had said in Thai when she thought I could not follow. So I put it in the column marked evidence. Evidence that she was honest, that I had found the one straight family in Thailand, that my ear was a safety device. I had built myself a smoke detector, and I stood there very pleased with it in a house I had not yet noticed I was pouring the foundations for. Songkran was the first time I went north, April 2024, 14 hours in a minivan, and if you have not done that journey, I will tell you what happens to the landscape. You leave Hua Hin and go up around Bangkok, and it is all shopping malls and factories and billboards for condominiums. And then somewhere past Korat, it starts to flatten out, and it does not stop flattening. Rice fields, dry ones in April, cracked and pale. Water buffalo standing in whatever mud is left. Every 20 kilometers a temple with far too much gold on it for the village it sits in, and the money goes out of it. You can watch it go. By the time you are into Royat province, the pickups are older, the shops are just a roller door and a fridge of Chang, and the houses are timber up on legs with a satellite dish on the roof and a dog underneath. Knox village is out past Cellopham, about 40 minutes off the main road. I am not going to name it exactly now. I had been sending 8,000 baht a month for 4 months by then, and I had thought of it as a rounding error, and it took me about 1 hour on that soi to understand what it actually was. A day's farm labor out there is 300 baht, maybe 350. You can do the arithmetic yourself. I was paying about the wages of a working man every month for medicine into a village where a working man is not always working. That is not nothing. That is not a rounding error. It only felt like one because I was measuring it against Norway. The family, her mother Wanida, her father Somchai, her brother At, and then a great swirling number of cousins and neighbors who came and went so freely that I gave up trying to work out who lived there. Fawn, the daughter, 11, all elbows, terrified of me for about a day and a half, and then not at all. They were kind to me. I want to be very clear about that. Genuinely, physically kind. Somchai took my bag out of my hands like it was a rule. Juanita cooked constantly and would not eat until I had, which made me eat too much, which made her cook more, and there was no exit from this loop that I could find in either language. Songkran itself, I will say this, the water thing is real and it is relentless, and nobody is exempt. 63 years old and a 9-year-old boy got me full in the face from a bucket while I was holding a plate of larb. Everybody laughed. I laughed. There is a version of me that would have been furious about that in Drammen, and I am not fond of that man. Then the rest of it. The proper Songkran, the part the tourists do not see. The water poured over the hands of the old people, respectfully, the whole family lined up, and me being pushed forward into the line because Somchai wanted it. Sitting on the floor of a wat with my legs going numb because I could not work out where to put my feet. Knock whispering corrections at me. I was walked to the neighbors 3 separate times. I noticed that. I want to be honest, I did notice it. I understood the word for face by then. Nah. I had heard it plenty, and I understood well enough what I was doing standing there in a yard being introduced for the second time to a woman I had already been introduced to. I was proof of something. My existence raised them, and I decided I did not mind. That is not naivety exactly. In Drammen, a man is worth what he earns, and then he retires, and he is worth nothing. And I had felt that. Out there I walked into a yard and I was somebody. If that is a transaction, fine. It was the best offer I had received in 3 years. The school fees came up over dinner in the second week, not as a request. Juanita said something to Knock about Fawn's school and the uniform and the extra English class, and Knock said something short back, and I understood the whole exchange before it reached me in English, which by that stage it did not always. I asked what the year cost. 45,000 baht, about 13,500 kroner, $1,200, for a year of a child's schooling, including everything. I paid 3 years forward. In one transfer the next morning, at the Krung Thai in Salafam, with the air conditioning roaring and a queue of people staring at me quite openly. Nobody asked me to do that, and I did it that way for a reason that has nothing to do with generosity, which is that I have spent 41 years on sites where you buy the materials before you start, all of them, and you do not begin a job you cannot finish. Paying forward is how I have always thought. It felt like competence. It also meant nobody could take it back, including me. Then the house. Their house was a timber place up on legs, maybe 40 years old. And I want you to understand that I did not go looking for a problem. I sat under it in the shade one afternoon, drinking a Leo, and I looked up at the underside of the floor because that is what I do in a building, and I saw termite damage in 2 of the main bearers. Not surface, through. And I went round the outside and looked at the roof structure and saw the sag in the ridge, and that the purlins had been sistered at some point by somebody with a hammer and hope. 3 monsoons, maybe 4. That is what I gave it. Nobody asked me. Nobody hinted. That is the sentence I have clung to for 2 years, like a man in the water clinging to a plank. And I am going to keep saying it because it is true. And I am also going to admit that a family that has been told a farang is coming does not need to ask. The house was simply there. It had been failing in front of them for a decade. All they had to do was let me look at it. I offered 900,000 baht. A local builder in Selafam quoted it. Concrete block, 2 bedrooms, raised, tile roof, a proper septic. About 270,000 kroner, around $25,000. In Norway, that is a kitchen, a bad kitchen. And here is where I made the mistake that only a builder makes. I did not just pay for it. I went up there for the poor. I stood in that yard in the heat with a bottle of water going warm in my hand, and I looked at the footings they had dug and the rebar the builder had laid in, and the spacing was wrong, not criminal, but wide and light, and the tie wire was rubbish. I made him do it again, through a translation app, with a stick in the dirt, with translating badly, and the builder's face going flat with the specific irritation of a man being corrected by an old foreigner who cannot even order rice properly. He hated me. Fair enough. He was right to. But I had a job again. That is the thing nobody says about these stories. For 3 weeks in May 2024, I got up at 5:30 and I had a purpose. And I stood over a pour and told men things about concrete that I have known since 1983. And it was the happiest I had been since my mother went into the home. I was not buying a woman. I want that understood. I was building a house. Not cried when the footings went in. Actually cried, turned away and did the thing with her sleeve. I believe that was real. I still believe it was real. That is the trouble with all of this. Nothing I have to tell you gets simpler. The house was finished in September 2024, 5 months, which for that part of the world is quick. And it was quick because I paid the builder on time every time, which is apparently not universal. It is not a mansion. I want people to understand the scale of what I'm talking about. 2 bedrooms, a main room, a proper concrete slab raised about 1/2 meter off the ground because the water comes through there in October, a tile roof, a septic tank that works, and a bathroom you can stand up in. Painted a pale green because Wanada chose the color off a chart and would not be moved. 910,000 baht in the end, with the extras. Roughly 273,000 kroner, $26,000. We had the blessing. 9 monks in the morning sat along the wall on a raised platform, chanting for what felt like an hour, the white string running from the Buddha image around the whole house and back, and everyone holding it. The smell of the incense and the new concrete together, I can still bring that up whenever I want, which is a problem. They put me at the front, right at the front next to Somchai. I did not ask for that. I want to say clearly, because everything after this is difficult, that was one of the best days of my life. Not one of the best days of my time in Thailand. One of the best days of my life, and I am 64 now, so that is a long field to be top of. Hold that. Please hold on to that while I tell you the rest, because if you let go of it, none of this will make any sense. The pickup came in November. 8 needed transport for the fields. That is a real thing, not an invented thing. The arrangement they had was with a neighbor who had a Toyota and took a cut of everything, and that neighbor had fallen out with Somchai over something that predated me by about 15 years. So the cassava was sitting there, and the neighbor was not coming. A second-hand Isuzu D-Max, 12 years old, 400,000 baht, about 120,000 kroner, $11,000. Now, I knew. I want that on the record because people watching will be shouting at their screens. I knew a foreigner cannot own land in Thailand. I had known that before I got on the airplane. I am a man who reads before he acts. That has been my whole personality since 1978. I knew the house I had just built was standing on Somchai's land and was therefore, in every sense a court would care about, Somchai's house. I had read the forms. I had read about the usufruct, the 30-year lease, the company structure that they tell you is legally shaky, and I had decided not to do any of it because asking a family to sign a legal instrument 2 months after they have fed you every day is a way of calling them thieves in a language everyone understands. And the pickup went into At's name. Because it had to. A vehicle can be in a foreigner's name actually. That one is allowed. But I would have needed the address paperwork and the certificate of residence from immigration. And Ayat needed to drive it. And it was simpler. Simpler. That was the word I used with myself. Here is the true reason. And it took me a year to be able to say it. If I had said no to the truck, then the truck would have been the first no. And a first no makes everybody go back and look at all the yeses. It would have meant standing in that yard under my own new roof and saying, I have decided the tap is closed now. And then everyone would have had to work out what I was, and I would have had to work out what I was, and I did not want that. It was not love that bought that pickup. It was pride. I did not want to be the farang who stops. So, let me give you the total, since I have been keeping the account. Medicine, 16 months by then, about 128,000 baht. School, 3 years forward, 135,000. House, $10,000. Pickup, $400,000. Plus the aunt's hospital thing, plus the funeral contribution for a cousin's husband, plus the ordination for a nephew, plus. The small things that are never small when you add up 16 months of them. Call it 1.6 million baht, about 470,000 kroner, roughly $45,000, out of 1.2 million kroner. So, more than a third of my mother gone in 18 months, and I still had the 800,000 baht sitting in the Bangkok bank, untouched for the retirement visa, which meant the actual free money, the money I could still make decisions with, was a good deal smaller than it sounded. And around this time I started spending long stretches up in Royet. Weeks, sometimes a month, because the house was there, and I had a room in it, and the flat in Hua Hin was 12,000 a month for a fridge to hum in. That is where the second half of this starts. Not with a phone, not with a photograph, with a plastic stool. You sit in the shade under the eaves in the afternoon, and it is 36 degrees, and there is a fan on an extension cord and a bottle of Leo going warm on the concrete beside you. The dogs are asleep in the dirt. There is a rooster who has no concept of time. Somewhere down the Soai, somebody is playing Morlem off a phone at full volume. And the family sits around and talks and talks and talks. in a sound-inflected Thai, at full speed, at full volume, because you are the furniture. I had been at the app for over 2 years by then, and there is a threshold with a language that nobody warns you about. For a long time you are catching words. You get maybe 1 in 6, and you hang the rest on tone and faces, and you are usually wrong. Then one day you are not catching words anymore. You are catching meaning. It arrives late, half a sentence behind, but it arrives complete. I crossed that line sometime in the winter, sitting on a plastic stool with a warm beer. The first thing I understood fully was nothing at all. Juanita complaining that the price of pork had gone up at the market in Cellopham, and that the woman who sells it is a thief. That was it. That was my great achievement after 26 months of an app. Pork inflation. I sat there and I was so pleased with myself I nearly said something. The second thing was a cousin, a woman, I never got her name straight, they all called her Polly, asking Knock what the faring actually had, not nastily, the way you ask what the weather will do. And Knock answered with a number, and the number was too high, and Pill made a small noise. I did not move. I looked at my beer. And then I did something I have not forgiven myself for. And I want to tell you about it because I think it is the real crime in this story, and it is mine. The next afternoon, I brought my stool closer. I moved the stool about a meter. That is all it was. From the corner by the water tank to the end of the bench where they sat in the afternoons. And I sat there with a beer and my phone in my hand and my face doing nothing. I did that for 8 months. I am going to describe what I heard, and I want to warn you first that it does not go in one direction. That is the thing. If it went in one direction, I could have packed a bag in a week. The first weeks were mostly warmth, honestly. Farang Jai Day. Good-hearted foreigner. I heard that perhaps 40 times that spring, and every time it was said kindly. Somchai said it to a man at the temple with real pride in his voice, but listen to it properly. Jai D is a compliment about a man's character. Farang Jai D is a category. It is a type of thing that exists, like a good buffalo or a reliable pump, and everyone in that yard knew several. I was a good one. There were bad ones. It is not an insult. It is just a slot. And I had spent 2 years believing I was a person out there. April, Ayat, and a cousin sitting on the step, talking about a second vehicle, a small truck for the cousin's brother-in-law, and the cousin saying, well, ask the Farang, and Ayat saying no, and the cousin pushing, and Ayat saying no again in a way that closed it. I remember being pleased with Ayat. Then in May I heard Knock defend me, and it was the best thing I have ever heard anybody say about me, and I got it by cheating. It was PL again. The cousin, making some joke about how old I was and something about how long she would have to wait. Not vicious, that black village humor. And Knock went off. Properly angry, that flat, hard, fast Isan that I could barely keep up with. And what I got out of it was, he built the house. Nobody else built the house. Your husband is here 20 years, and he has not put a roof on anything. And she was still going when I got up and walked round the back so my face would not give me away. I stood behind that pale green wall I paid for, and I put my hands on it, and I cried like an idiot. That is true, too. Everything I am telling you is true at the same time, which is the whole problem. And then, 11 days later. 11. I counted them afterwards, obsessively, the way you count when you are looking for a pattern in a crack. Knock and Juanita in the kitchen in the evening. The rice cooker going, and Knock saying, not coldly, this is important, in a completely ordinary tired voice, that there was maybe 4.5 left, meaning hundreds of thousands of baht, and that at what they were spending it would cover Fawn through school and the mother's medicine, but not the operation if the eyes went, and that they should not ask for anything more this year. She had my balance nearly right. She had never seen a statement. She had worked it out. And what she was doing, I want to be fair because it took me a long time to be fair about this. What she was doing was rationing. She was protecting the resource. She was telling her mother to stop asking. But she was talking about me the way I have talked about a load-bearing wall. I did not sleep well after that. I want to say that plainly instead of dressing it up. 64 years old, lying on a mattress in a house I built, with a fan turning, listening to the dogs go off one after another down the whole SOA, doing arithmetic in the dark. 450,000 baht, about 135,000 kroner. That was the free money, plus the 800,000 locked in the Bangkok bank for the visa that I could not touch without becoming an overstayer. And then the worst one, in September, and it was not cruel. That is what I cannot get past. Nobody was cruel. The two of them under the eaves in the afternoon, and I was inside with the door open, and wanted to ask her daughter straight out, "Do you love him?" There was a pause. It was not a long pause, maybe 2 seconds. But I have lived in that pause for a year. And Knox said, "I am going to give you this as close as I can, and I have checked the words since. I have looked them up more times than is healthy." She said that he has bunken to this family. Bunken. It does not translate. It is not gratitude and it is not debt. It is the thing you owe to someone who has done real good for you. And the paying of it is not an insult. It is the highest thing there is. She said she would look after him. She said she would not leave him. She said he is a good man and I will take care of him until the end. And she meant every word of it. And my mother's money is in that house and I believe she meant it. And she did not say the other thing. Her mother did not ask again. Because for Wanada, that answer was the right answer. That answer was better than the other one. A woman who loves you can stop loving you. A woman who owes you bunkan is holding something that does not expire. I sat in that room with the fan going, and I understood that I had been given something enormous, and that it was not the thing I came for, and that there was nobody in the world I could explain that to. Because who do you tell? Sverre? Sverre would have said, "Mate, she's not on a bar stool. Take the win." And he would have been right. That is the thing that makes my chest go tight even now. He would have been right. I never confronted her. Not once. Not one word. And people always ask me why. And there is an answer, and it is not noble. If I had said anything, I would have had to say the first sentence. I understand Thai. I have understood Thai for a long time. I have been sitting 3 feet from you for 8 months with my face doing nothing. And then everything of hers I had heard would have been ruined, because she would have known I was listening when she said it. The May thing, behind the wall, the best thing anybody ever said about me, I would have lost that. It only counts because she did not know. And also, mostly if I am honest, it was the last thing I had that was mine. My family in Drammen took the rest. That app on my phone at night with the curtains shut was the only thing in 30 years I had done entirely for myself. And I was not going to hand it over so I could win an argument I did not want to win. So I said nothing. I sat on the stool. I drank the warm Leo. I said "Kop kun crap" when the food came, badly on purpose with the wrong tone, and Knock would correct me, and everyone would laugh, and I would laugh too. For 3 more months I did that. I left in December 2025. I want to tell you how, because it is the only part of this where I behave like myself, and I am not sure that is a compliment. I booked the flight from the house, sitting on the bed with the fan going, on my phone, while Wanada was frying something in the next room. Then I went into Selifam on the back of Ayat's motorbike, and I paid 3 months of rent forward on the Hua Hin flat, so nobody would be chasing anybody, and I closed nothing else because there was nothing else to close. The bank account stays. The 800,000 baht for the visa is still sitting in the Bangkok bank as far as I know, which I will get to. And then I wrote a note, in Thai. Written Thai, which I had been reading for nearly 3 years and had never once written by hand. It took me 4 hours at that table with a phone propped against the water bottle, and my hands are what they are, so the letters looked like a child's. I did not use the translation app. I want to be clear about that. Every word in that note was mine, badly spelled, in the wrong register, probably with the tone marks all over the place. I am not going to tell you what it said. That is the one thing I am keeping. But I will tell you what the first line was, because the first line was the confession. The first line said, "I understand Thai. I have understood for a long time." I left it on the table under a glass, took my bag, and got the 6 a.m. bus to Khon Kaen, which is exactly how I left Drammen, by the way. Quietly, correctly, everything paid up, nobody woken. I have now done that twice in 4 years to the only 2 families I have had. Somebody cleverer than me can work out what that means. I have not managed it. The messages started that afternoon. The first ones were confused, then hurt. Then Ott sent a voice message that I could not listen to for about a month. And when I did, it was him asking, quite reasonably, whether he had done something. And then in January, a long one from Nok in Thai typed about 600 words. I have read it. I am going to say 11 times, but that is a lie. It is more than that. She did not ask for money, not in that one and not in any of them since. She asked whether I was safe. She asked whether the thing she said to her mother in September was the thing I heard, because she had worked out that it must have been something, and she had gone back through the whole autumn in her head. She was right. She found it. Sitting in that house without me there, she reconstructed it, and she wrote that she had told her mother the true thing. The thing a Thai woman says about a man she intends to keep, and that she did not understand why it had made me leave, and that if I would tell her what the word was that I wanted, she would try to learn it. I have never answered. That is the worst thing in this story, and it is mine, not hers. So, where I am, Ålesund, not Drammen. I could not go back to Drammen. It is a small place, and everybody knows everybody's business. Ålesund is on the west coast, out among the islands, and it rains about 230 days a year. And I have a rented flat on the 3rd floor with a view of the fjord if you stand at the correct end of the kitchen. 210,000 kroner. That is what is left of 1.2 million, about $20,000, plus the 800,000 baht in Thailand, which is another 230,000 kroner, which I have not touched, and I could not tell you today whether that is because it is complicated to move or because moving it would be the end of something. Probably the second. I am 64 and I still cannot make myself close an account. I have the Norwegian pension, which is not nothing, and I am fine. I want to say that so nobody worries. I am not eating from a tin. There is a photograph on the fridge. Pale green house, tile roof, Somchai standing in front of it with his arms at his sides because he never worked out what to do in a photograph. It is a good house. It will be standing in 60 years. The rebar is right because I made him do it again. And it is half empty most of the year. 2 old people in a 3-bedroom house I built with my mother's money. Still nothing from my brothers, nothing from Ingrid. That has not moved. And I have had a long time now to think about the fact that I went 12,000 kilometers to a place where a family made a space for me at the front of a ceremony, and that this is exactly, precisely what I had lost, and that when it was handed to me on the terms they had, I could not take it. So, what do I tell you? I was not scammed. Please, if you take nothing else. There was no other man, no fake illness, no invented buffalo. Every baht I spent went where I was told it went, and I have seen the receipts standing up in a field. Here is what I did wrong, and there are 2 things. The first is that I wanted to be needed, and I did not know that was different from being loved. And out there, I think both can be true at the same time, in the same woman, in the same week, and a man raised in Norway does not have anywhere to put that. So do not fund a family until you can afford to be told the truth about your place in it. Ask what the terms are. Say the word money out loud, early, when it is embarrassing, because it is only embarrassing once and it is expensive forever after. The second is the language. Learn it. Learn all of it. But say so on the first day, out loud before 1 krona moves. Because a secret ear is not a safety device. It is a way of collecting evidence in a case you are not brave enough to bring. I understood every word, and I still got it wrong. That is Björn Halvorsen. He is 64, he lives on the 3rd floor in Ålesund, and to my knowledge, he has still not replied to that message. I want to leave you with the difficult part, because this channel does not exist to make you feel superior to old men. The word knock used to her mother, bunkun, is not a lesser thing than love. In Thai culture, it is arguably the greater thing. It is what a child owes a parent. It binds tighter and it lasts longer, and it does not depend on how anybody feels on a Tuesday. She was not settling. She was offering him the strongest promise available in her language, in a private conversation where there was no reason to perform, and he heard a receipt. So the question is not whether she loved him. The question is whether anybody in that house ever sat down and asked what the other one thought was happening. Nobody lied. Nobody had to. Two people can be completely honest for 2 years in different languages and still be running entirely different books. If you are heading out there, and plenty of you are, sit with that for a minute before you send the first 8,000 baht. Thank you for watching. This is Thailand.